Hello, my name is Jeff Tito Thitoff, and welcome to my debut as host of the Hoops on Lane podcast, be covering Ohio State men's and women's basketball throughout the season. Both teams should be very exciting this year. I appreciate you tuning in today, subscribing if you would please. You can find us also on Facebook and hoopsonlane.com. And if you want to drop me an email, we'd love to hear from you, hoopsonlane@gmail.com. I've lived in Columbus, Ohio almost my entire life. Followed the men's basketball team as far back as the late 1970s. Yes, I'm dating myself a little bit there. And also on the women's side, I've been out there covering them for the Columbus Dispatch, among other places, but been to their games as fans also for quite some time. They will both get love here on this show. And we're going to start off by talking about the men today. They've got two games in the books. They defeated Cincinnati 64-56, and then they just had a win over UMass Lowell 76-56. That game was on Sunday. The Ohio State men's team this year, under Chris Holtmann, it's going to be interesting to see early on how they develop together, how they find a rhythm, a rotation. They've got a really big game coming up on Wednesday against Villanova. 10th-ranked Villanova comes here to play the Buckeyes. That will be their first big test. The Cincinnati game was tough early on. Ohio State started off slowly, but once they got their rhythm going, they played pretty well after that. The UMass Lowell game, you're not going to learn much about a team like Ohio State in that kind of environment, but I'll go over some of my thoughts for the first couple of games and kind of where I see this Ohio State team headed. And again, hoopsonlane@gmail.com if you'd like to drop me an email and let me know your thoughts on what I'm talking about today and what the Buckeye season looks like for you as well. In both games, actually, Ohio State started off very slowly offensively. That could be expected with all the new faces you have in there. They've got some stud freshmen that come in. DJ Carton, the first one that comes to mind, the five-star kid out of the state of Iowa, the guard. So they've got a lot of people that are integrating back into this. They've got to find a way. Holtmann's got to find a way early how to make all of this mesh. Caleb Wesson, what I love about Caleb Wesson right now, and by the way, I've been a fan of his. I watched him in high school, and it's amazing to me how much different he looks this year. His body has been transformed. He's dropped 35 or 40 pounds from last season. He's always had very quick feet for a man his size, but he still maintains that big backside, which is very significant as far as an advantage for him when he's posting up other people. What I love about his game now, though, what I've noticed in the two games that I've seen him, probably one of the bigger advantages he is going to have now, one of the bigger areas of improvement for him because of this newfound size, is how he's going to play defensively, defending against the pick and roll. I saw and I know UMass Lowell's not some top-level competition, but it was interesting to me to see how quick he was when they tried to run a pick and roll, how quickly he could recover from that. And he just looks like he is flowing so much better out there. And I hope this means they can load up his minutes even more this year because of that. I understand that he's going to shoot more threes this year. And for him to succeed at the next level or get a look at the next level, that's a part of his game he is going to have to get better at. So it might not be in the best interests of Ohio State this year for him to be a guy who shoots a lot of threes or shoots significantly more than he did last year. But I think he has to if he wants to polish his game to get ready for the NBA, which is he's tested the waters. And, came back this year. I love that he came back this year. I love how he looks. He seems to have really bought in to the conditioning program at Ohio State. The Buckeyes went to Wesson early on in the game against UMass Lowell, got him in foul trouble early. The Buckeyes countered with C.J. Walker and Kyle Young both getting in foul trouble early, which didn't help out. One of the things I do like, though, when DJ Carton and C.J. Walker have been on the floor together. They were able to get to the basket. I don't know. I'm curious to see if they'll be able to do that against Villanova on Wednesday. That'll be a tougher test for them. Now, Villanova's got a stronger front court. We'll preview that more. You'll get a preview for that on Wednesday. It'll be interesting for me to see DJ Carton and C.J. Walker. I think that they are a interesting combination when they're on the floor together, both very dynamic playmakers. And Dwayne Washington, I love what he does in the backcourt as well. One of the advantages Chris Holtmann has this year is he seems to have more depth and specifically more quality backcourt depth. Last year, it wasn't always the case. If a guy got in foul trouble in the backcourt, it could cause major problems for them. This year, I think that with what they've got, not only offensively but defensively with these guys, they look so solid defensively to me as well. And when they go up against a guy like Michigan State with Cassius Winston, When they go up against that kind of guard play, I'm glad that Ohio State now is going to have some depth and some different rotations, different looks. If someone gets in foul trouble, it's not going to be the end of the world. Out of all the guards so far, Carton's the one that's impressed me the most. Yesterday, they left some assists on the floor that Carton had out there with guys missing shots that they should have made. I love Carton's motor and his confidence, the bold way he drives to the hole. And there was a play midway through the first half. A defender picked the ball and poked it away from Carton. And normally you might see a young player respond by committing a silly foul to kind of go back after the ball type of thing and do something, a frustration foul. You might see a young player have that. And Carton instead played solid, even dove to the floor, got the ball back, and Ohio State had possession again. So that's something that impressed me, a small thing, a moment in the game. Now later on, Carton did look frustrated after losing the ball on a different occasion, but the fact he did it on that first one was very impressive to me. Yesterday, Caleb Wesson had 11 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists at the half, finished with 13, 13, and 5. Carton had 13 points. Kyle Young had 10 points in 15 minutes. Kyle Young was a guy who was very instrumental in the Cincinnati game. He had 14 points and 13 rebounds in that win. And he's a guy they're going to count on also. He is somebody who is all over the floor, a very good rebounder. And he will help to take some of that pressure off of Caleb Wesson on hitting the boards. But that's what I've seen the first couple of games. That's what's impressed me. Caleb Wesson, the way his body's looked. DJ Carton, what he's done, the whole backcourt in general with C.J. Walker, also Dwayne Washington, Kyle Young. It's going to be fun to watch them this year. The guard play will be more and more important as we get into the Big Ten season. The test against Villanova on Wednesday, we're going to see learn a little more about Ohio State there. We didn't learn much in the UMass Lowell game because it was a blowout win against a clearly overmatched team. But we'll learn much more about Ohio State on Wednesday when they take on Villanova. This team, like Holtman's first two teams, I think this team will be in the NCAA tournament, and they're widely regarded as a top 15 team in the country. So that leads you to think they might be a 3 or a 4 seed. I think that's about right for them, probably a 3 or 4. I'd be disappointed if they were 5. I would be shocked if they were 2. So if they're a 3 or a 4 seed this year, I think that's what we'll see. In the Big Ten, they'll be top 3 in the Big Ten is what I expect as well, as long as they can stay healthy. Now, Andre Weston's out for a couple of weeks. He got injured in the Cincinnati game, so that's going to force some of these other guys. It's not the worst thing in the world. Having to play these younger guys more than you may have expected to have to play them early on is not necessarily the worst thing in the world for Chris Holtman. It's going to force him to work other guys into the rotation where, Weston's 20 to 25 minutes a game now are going to get distributed among others. So that's not terrible. The Villanova game will be a real test for Ohio State. We'll see how it goes. The fact it's on the home court for the Buckeyes, I think, will be very important for them. But we'll keep talking men's basketball throughout the season. I do want to transition over now to the women's side. The women had their first regular season game, and it was down in Wittenberg, Springfield, Ohio, Wittenberg University yesterday on Sunday. They defeated Valparaiso 89-38 in the Ohio Basketball Hall of Fame Classic. Ohio State women have got so many new faces this year. And last year I thought head coach Kevin McGuff, did a fantastic job with that squad. They did not make the NCAA tournament. I think they finished 14-15. It was not a great year for them as far as the record goes. And I watched this team play quite a bit last year. I was out there covering them quite a bit last year. I was so impressed with what Kevin McGuff had to deal with that team. And it's not a knock on the players, just he had a lot of grad transfers and he had a lot of young players. And trying to massage that by doing right by the older players. We're not going to totally abandon the older players, even though this is not going to be a championship team, and also giving the young players plenty of playing time. That was incredibly difficult, I think, for him to manage that. You had to have a foot in each bucket of water on that one, and he did a great job with it last year, putting together a team that had lots of new faces again, and you had a wide gap in the experience in a lot of cases. And they were fun to watch last year. They were competitive. But like you would expect with any young team, there was some inconsistency in there, especially with someone like a Dorka Juhas. Dorka Juhas, by the way, led the team in rebounding and scoring both last year. She's a 6'4" sophomore. She's a fantastic talent. Last year, I think sometimes she fell into the trap of if she got off to a slow start, she could get lost early in the game. And I would notice McGuff would take her out. If she missed a couple of shots early, he would bring her back over and try to get her back going again. And this year, if she can maintain that kind of consistency, she's one of the best players in the Big Ten. She is that good. Her jump shot is better. She had 16 points and 7 rebounds yesterday in the 89-38 win over Valpo. And she continues to work on that outside jumper. She's going to be tough this year. The other freshman last year, now a sophomore, Janae Crooms, she scored double figures her last 8 games last year. As the season wore on, Crooms was someone who was bringing the ball up the court more often, making plays. She's one of those, she can score, she can get rebounds, she can hand out assists. Sometimes she gets a little bit out of control. That was last year. We'll see this year. She led them in assists again on yesterday. She had 12 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists. But she's also a great talent and sees the floor really well. When she gets going, if she'll find the teammates or she can take it herself. She's got enough strength to really go up against a lot of taller players than her and have success. The big news for Ohio State that came out for the women's team was that Braxton Miller, Braxtin, not Braxton Miller, the former Ohio State player in the NFL. Braxton Miller is a junior. She played her first 2 years at Oklahoma State. She's from Dayton, actually. And she averaged almost 15 points a game last year for Oklahoma State, one of the top scorers in the Big 12. She transferred this year to Ohio State, applied for an immediate eligibility waiver, and just the other day, she was awarded that, where they said, yep, you can play right away. You are immediately eligible. This is why it's important. She's a 5'11 kid, by the way. But she brings that experience that Ohio State's going to need. They've got so many freshmen, young freshmen coming in. When you talk about guys like J.C. Sheldon out of Dublin Coffin High School, Kirsten Bell, the 3-time Miss Ohio from Canton. You've got a lot of young players coming in, and Ohio State needs experience, and all of a sudden Braxton Miller becomes very important there. She had 5 points yesterday, but she is somebody who's going to be very critical that McGuff's going to have to lean on throughout the season. She's played meaningful minutes at the collegiate level in big games, and that's what this team is lacking, somebody with that kind of a background that does that. Speaking of Sheldon, she had 12 points. Kirsten Bell had 10 points in that game. Ohio State will play again on Wednesday. They're going to host Cincinnati. This team here, though, I think they're an NCAA tournament team this year. I do. I think that they will surprise some people in the Big Ten as the season wears on. I think McGuff's a great coach, and he's got the top 4 recruiting class in the country coming in. Lots of good players, returning players. You got Dorka Juhas, and you got Crooms on that team. Also adding in Braxton Miller. They've got more depth this year than they had last year as far as people they can count on to score. Last year, it didn't seem there were as many competent scorers on the team. This year, though, I feel like they got more. Michaela Wattern, by the way, from last year's team, who had been at Ohio State for 5 years, and she is now an assistant coach on the bench. That also will help things out. I think it's a good person to have on the bench with the freshmen that played with her last year that are going to be able to talk to her and that she knows well. She can relate to them. I think that's a big plus as well for Ohio State this season. So the women are going to play on Wednesday against Cincinnati on the road. The men play Wednesday. They host Villanova over the Shot at 7 o'clock. The women play at 7 o'clock as well. And so we'll get previews of those games coming up on Wednesday. And again, thank you for tuning in. I'm Jeff Tito Thitoff. You can find us on hoopsonlane@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you. And subscribe. Find us on Facebook and Twitter. And we will talk to you soon.
Hoops on Lane is a production of Thitoff Studios.
Thitoff.